bizarre as this might sound, I have not seen evidence that there are like green saucer men out there invading us from other worlds. I have seen evidence of spiritual phenomenon. I have talked to people in the intelligence agencies that have told me personally 95% of the crap that you see out there about UFOs is fake. It is disinformation. The Irish called them fairies. Buddhists might have called them like Buddhas or Devas. The Arab world might have called them jinn or genie. And I think that there is a overwhelming amount of evidence in the ancient world that there were beings that were coming from the spirit world and were assisting humanity. And I think they're spirits. That's what they are.
Welcome back to the transmission, my friends. If you are fool enough, as I apparently am, to attempt to talk about the unspeakable, think about the ungrokkable, you're going to run into some paradox. You're going to hit some brain melting territory. And speaking of brain melting, I don't think there's a more reliable way to turn your brain into absolute chowder than to soak it in the UFO phenomenon, the paranormal. It's just so mercurial, so elusive, so impossible to fully make sense of no matter what lens you apply to it. That said, I do think some lenses are clearly too limited in scope to fully capture its majesty, its strangeness, its multiplicity. And that's why I do think it's worth applying the spiritual lens to the phenomenon, because it is a wide angle that allows for a lot. That said, despite whatever I put in the thumbnail or ended up naming this episode, my mind is far from settled on this matter. In fact, I think there are probably multiple things going on. I'm but a humble explorer. Not to sound like I'm giving some kind of disclaimer or something. And I guess while I'm in the neighborhood of making disclaimers, maybe this mind meld, or at least some of the content in it, is a bridge too far for some of you. And I get that. The lore of the Bledsoes goes out there. And yet, Ryan Bledsoe and his family really do seem to be ground zero for a ton of high weirdness, for a ton of unexplainable phenomena. As you'll hear in this episode, or maybe you already know if you're an astute listener, I have two friends that have experienced said high weirdness with the Bledsoes directly. So it's impossible for me to ignore. I've already spelunked into the rabbit hole to some degree, so I'm definitely intrigued. I'm definitely paying attention. And speaking of Ryan Bledsoe, he's not just an experiencer, he has become a seeker in multiple respects, and he is also a fellow caster of pods because he has his own show, Bledsoe Said So, in which he gets into all corners of this milieu and his family's experiences and more. Links for Ryan Bledsoe are in the description. Same for Third Eye Drops. And on the note of this show, do me a favor, my friends, tickle the algorithm with all altruistic buttons now. We seem to be hitting some kind of a slowdown, so like, share, comment, subscribe. It is of the utmost importance. And did you know we've got a massive back catalog of audio-only episodes, so do subscribe wherever you listen to pods. And if you would like to go deeper and also support the show, riff with me and hundreds of other Wonder Dippers, come join over at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. We've got a patron-only Discord server, a book club. We do monthly Zoom hangs. You can get rewards like stickers, pins, shirts, and more, all only on Patreon. We are waiting for you, my friends. And speaking of waiting, there will be no more when it comes to this mind meld. Ryan Bledsoe, on one hand, you're such a nice, seemingly normal guy. On the other hand, you and your family have been the subject of probably like some of the most high weirdness that I'm aware of. And I know you've told this story a million times, but for the sake of everybody who doesn't know the story, how did this all start? And also just thanks for being here, man. I'm excited to not only riff with you, but to strike up an acquaintanceship.
I appreciate that, Michael, and I'm really excited to do this show. So thank you for having me from the bottom of my heart. It's been at least over 6 months now that you've been on my radar because of our mutual friend Molly, and she had been telling me to reach out to you. And then my other friend Chris was like, "You got to reach out to Michael." So I was like, "Okay, I'll reach out to Michael." And you're a really cool guy. You're way cooler than I, even would have thought. So thank you.
You're too
Um,
kind. You're too kind.
I appreciate that. So how did it all begin? In 2007, um, my dad and my oldest brother, Chris Jr., were out fishing one night on the Cape Fear River in North Carolina. It's this really, really long river that spans almost the entire state of North Carolina. And it takes like almost 8 hours to drive all the way across the state from end to end. So it's like hundreds of miles, right? And anyway, so in Fayetteville, North Carolina, they're just fishing on the riverbank, deep in the woods with a few of their, you could say, contractors, right? Because my dad was a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And just for a little bit of context, my family had fallen on really hard times around this time, just a couple years before. My parents had a very successful multi-million-dollar business, and they had 100 or I don't know how many employees. I was a kid, but it was a lot of employees, and you know 50 leased trucks and all this overhead that was just very mentally stimulating. And then my dad got really sick, like really, really sick. He had Crohn's disease, but the stress of running the business coupled with the flare ups of Crohn's disease made him just really incapable of continuing. And 9/11 hit, which made the housing industry tank. I mean, around that time, it was just very hard to make it in that industry. So a bunch of things coalesced to where my mom and my dad had to get out of the business, and we went bankrupt by the time I was about 12 years old. And so 2007 comes around, and we're just really feeling the pressure of all this, the fallout of losing the business and having to move across town. And my dad's just really suffering. He's been physically sick, mentally sick, and he was just kind of at the end of his rope. And he was not really feeling it that night when he was fishing with these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't want to disturb anybody or be a Debbie Downer. So he just kind of walks away on his own for a little bit. And he's kind of praying, like, God, could you please heal me or, end my suffering? Like, just basically turn this around. I can't go on like this anymore. Right. So he's walking up this path. And just for a little more context, so we're out in the like southernmost country part of Fayetteville, North Carolina. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of deep woods, old highway roads that sometimes don't even have street lights, and it's like pitch black at night kind of thing, miles
Mm-hmm.
away from town. And they're fishing in one of these areas. So they're far away from, everyone else in the woods. So my dad starts walking from their embankment on the river up back to the street where they drove in, which is about a half-mile walk. It's a very narrow dirt road where only one car can fit going either way. And it's just like muddy, dirty, like, 4x4 truck to get through this path. It's kind
Yeah.
of roughing it. And he's walking up this path, and he starts to hear this rustling in the bushes on either side of him. And it really spooked him. And he's kind of getting down on his hands and knees, trying to see if he can see anything in the bushes. Maybe it's a turkey, maybe it's a fox or a coyote or something. Um, it really had his hair standing up on his neck. And the thing about my dad is he's a very accomplished hunter. At one point, he was on record for killing the biggest black bear in North Carolina. I
Oh,
think it
wow.
was called like the Boone and Crockett magazine or something like that. And the point is, this was the first time where he felt unnerved by something that might be in the woods around him. So that was kind of the first key that maybe something was moving or acting different, right? So this goes on for several minutes as he's walking this path. When he stops, the sound stops, and then he keeps moving, and he hears this rustling in the bushes around him. He gets to the top of the trail where they drove in from the road, and there's these two big, he calls them these orange balls of fire, and they're sitting on the horizon. There's two of them, and they look like they would have been the setting sun, except they weren't. It was just these two big orange balls. So my dad's freaking out. Oh my God, he's thinking it's the end of the world, alien invasion. All these thoughts are running through his head.
Yeah.
He knows this is not something normal, right? So he turns to run. And then when he turns back one more time just to get a glimpse, a third one shoots up. And the next thing he remembered, he was back at the campfire, just walking up. and the truck was moved. The fire was out that they had. All the fishing poles were kind of out of the water. They were done fishing. It was late at night. He wasn't aware of this at the time, but it was about 11 p.m. by the time he returned. The three adults that they were fishing with were like, "Where have you been? We've been searching for you for hours." And my dad's like, "No, I just walked right up the street and came right back." He had no clue that there had been 4 hours of missing time. And it took him about a year to even realize that, right? My brother was missing, and then my dad goes out calling for him. He finds him in the woods. So this is where it starts to get really weird. My brother was 17 at the time too. And he's looking for my dad at one point, because like I said, he had been gone for hours. So my brother just kind of goes off on his own. Maybe he wants to see deer in the woods, just kind of wanders off, and he sees these red lights in the forest. It starts looking like these two little red orbs kind of bobbing. And then as they get closer, it splits into four. And then as they get even closer, he sees these 3 to 4 foot tall beings that are just walking forward towards him in the woods. And he kind of like panics. And to this day, he still doesn't know if they like froze him, if they put some sort of hypnosis on him or something to that effect, but he couldn't move. He couldn't react. He couldn't scream or cry or anything. He was just frozen there for about 2 hours, he estimates. And one of them at all times was staring at him, making eye contact with him. The other one was walking around, picking up trash, picking up bottles, sticks, and twigs and things like that. So hours of this goes by, and the other guys are just fishing. What people have to understand is in North Carolina, people are pretty used to being in the woods, hunting, fishing. It's a part of like everyday culture here. That's pretty normal to just go explore the woods by yourself. They're not thinking anything weird with my brother looking around in the woods. You know what I mean? But anyway, so my dad gets back. He calls out to my brother. When he stumbles up to where my brother is, these beings vanish. And my brother's free, and he runs up to my dad. He's freaking out. He's crying, "Dad, I've been seeing these creatures in the woods," And my dad's saying, "I've been seeing these UFOs." Like they're both freaking out at each other frantically at the same time. And the other guys are like, "Okay, something is not right here." They thought it was a prank at first, and they're like, "This isn't funny." They're all arguing, like, y'all need to quit messing around. All this pandemonium is starting to break out. And then one of the other guys in the group shouts, "Look!" And they look up in the sky, and what looked like stars, 8 or 9 stars, they start scrambling around, like just doing this circle in the sky and this crazy movement. And then a few of them shoot down, literally from the sky down to the other side of the Cape Fear River and land in the woods. So they're freaking out. They're like, "We got to get out of here." They all hop in my dad's truck and they're driving out of there, right? So they're all arguing about who's going home first to see their wife and kids for the last time, because they're literally thinking it's the end of the world, right? They're thinking fighter jets are going to be showing up, Black Hawks. I mean, Fayetteville is the home of the largest military base in the world too. So surely they're thinking like there's going to be a military force any minute, right? For Pope Air Force Base. So they're all freaking out about, who goes home first. And by the time they get up to that path that I was telling you about, that's like a half-mile walk into the woods or a drive into the woods, they get up to the top of the path where my dad first saw the orange lights in the sky. And when they get to that top and they're heading out to go to the road, they see one of these white lights, one of these massive glowing, it's like a craft, so to speak, but it's like pure glowing light. It's hovering on the road in front of them. And they slam to a stop, and it's literally facing them. And it floats up over them, goes over the truck, and goes away. So they start driving down the road. They're really freaking out. Before they actually leave, though, this is important. There's a trailer nearby of people that they knew. I mean, this is a really like old community of families that have been around for a long time, and kind of everybody knows everybody, right? They go up to this trailer. The door's open where the storm door, they can bang on the storm door and see through it. The lights are on in the house. The vehicles are in the yard, and they're yelling, "Hey, hey," trying to get their attention. And nobody reacts. It was the strangest thing. It's like, obviously they were home. Nobody came to the door. They heard somebody shoot at the light multiple times, like shotgun or rifle or something, 2 or 3 times.
That's crazy.
And it gets even crazier.
That would not be my reaction. Like if I saw some like luminous glowing vehicle, like better shoot that thing.
I mean, you're in the woods of North
That's
Carolina.
true. That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And anyway, so this goes by. They start banging on the door. Someone shoots at it. They never could find out who shot at it. We had people from NASA literally go around the community door knocking, like trying to find who shot at it. They never could determine who. So they're taking off down the road, and they get to this point about a half mile from the original location that they were at down the highway, where one of these things is hovering in the sky over them, like over the road. And my dad slams to a stop, and everyone's like, go, 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 freaking out, right? But my dad kind of like needed to stop because the location was very peculiar. It was the location that his first wife died in his arms back in the 1980s. I think it was 1983. And they were a young couple, recently married, had only been married like 11 months or something like that. They were like 20 and 21 years old, and she died in a car crash in that spot. It was a notorious dead man's curve where lots of people die because they take the curve too fast. And yeah, so Dad thought it was very strange that the thing was over that spot, and it was very meaningful to him. And everyone else is like, "Get out of here!" You know what I mean? So anyway, so he picks it up. He gets them all home. And he and my brother get home, which was only about 2 or 3 miles from this location, you know? And it's important to note at this point that at the time, so my now 90-year-old grandmother, who at the time was only about, I don't know, 65 or something like that, but she had, I'm sorry, that's totally wrong math, 75, right? She's been a widow my whole life since 1994, right? And she has this deep fear of like staying alone, especially in the dark. So like my uncle lives with her full time, but there are a lot of occasions where if he's out of town hunting or fishing or whatever, people in our family will take shifts to go and stay at her house. So there's a lot of times where people will just go stay with her for the weekend or for several days at a time or whatever. At this time, me and my mother and my brother Jeremy and my sister Emily were all staying at her house for this particular weekend. We were not home, but my dad and my brother Chris Jr., they got back to the house and they're panicking. They're shutting all the blinds. They're turning on all the lights. They're grabbing all the guns we have, rifle, shotguns, whatever. And they're, thinking they're going to fight off some invasion force. And it's also important to note that, this will make sense later, but at first, my dad was very afraid when he saw those orange lights. Like I said, he turned to run. Mm-hmm. But when he came back and he walked back up to the campfire, and again, in UFO terminology, this is what's known as missing time.
Yeah.
And this was brought to our attention by the MUFON investigators that it's common in what they call CE4 abduction cases. It's this mysterious UFO lingo. But the fact of the matter is he was not aware that he was somewhere else because something with his memory was altered. But when he came back, he was no longer afraid. He was very calm, and he was the only one in the group not freaking out. That's why he slammed on the brakes to look at the spot where it was hovering. And he was, just kind of in his head, like, why are they so afraid? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so the dogs in our backyard start barking by the time they get, situated at the house. My grandfather was our next door neighbor, and he had this massive L-shaped kennel that could hold like anywhere from 25 to 50 dogs, hunting dogs, because our family, like I said, the Bledsoes were really big hunters, and they still are. And we had all these hound dogs in the backyard that the whole family would stash their hounds there. They're like literally bred and trained hunting hounds, and they start just going crazy. So my dad's thinking, oh no, someone's breaking into the garage or the shed or something like that. So my brother's like, no, don't go out there. Don't go out there. And my dad's like, I got to go check. I have tools out there that I don't want, stolen. So he gets out there. He takes our dog, our house dog, our personal dog. My brother goes with him. They go around to where the kennel is, where all the barking is taking place, thinking they're going to find somebody. And my dad's, the dog is looking in the woods like it's trained on something in there. So my dad's like, okay, Junior, we're going to sit rows through the bushes, and we're going to run around this way and cut them off. And Junior's freaking out. No, Dad, please, let's go home. Let's go home. Let's run back to the house. So Dad's like, I got to go stop him, right? So he sicks the dog through the woods. He starts to run around the corner to cut him off. By the time he is running down our yard, it's a pretty big yard too. It was 6 acres. By the time he's running down the yard, he sees Junior's running home. He couldn't take it anymore, and he cut home. My dad gets around this wooded area, and he gets to this point where the dog was leading this thing in the woods. And when my dad gets there, there's this 3 to 4 foot tall. It's hard to measure, right? When you've only seen him a few times, it's like you don't put a ruler beside him, but we estimate they were about 3 to 4 foot tall, really short. And it's standing there. It's glowing. It has a triangle on its chest, these glowing red eyes. It's translucent like glass, like it's made of glass, but it's glowing and kind of like the color of the moon. And Dad stops and he's like,
does it, sorry, I'm just curious, just the image in my head and everybody else, is this thing proportion wise pretty similar to, I mean, other than the height, is it similar to a human? Does it have a larger head like you hear in other?
It has a round head. I have a depiction here. If you want to drop this in your video, that is totally okay, but I'm going to send you this really quick live so that you can see my dad's painting of it. It's going to come through in just a second here. And like I said, you're more than welcome to include this in the episode if you want. But this is how my dad depicted it in 2009. So it's glowing, it's luminous, it's kind of round, it's lanky, but it's really short. This image that Dad painted is actually depicting that moment when it was in our backyard. And anyway, so Dad is like, he surrenders. He's like, okay, you got me. You know, I give up. And the being told him telepathically, you don't understand. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you. And then the dog shows up through the bushes at that point. It just vanishes. It's gone. And Dad's looking at the dog and it was like, you know, where'd it go? You know, kind of just stunned. So anyway, he and my brother go get in the truck and they go sleep in a cornfield somewhere. They drive away. And the next night it happens again. My dad and my brother are there. They see a light in the backyard. And this time my dad grabs a rifle. And my brother's like, don't go out there. Don't go out there. And Dad's like, I gotta put a stop to this. Because he's thinking whatever is out there terrorizing my son, I have to kill it so that, you know, I can rest easy knowing that my son is safe. So he grabs his rifle. He goes out to our backyard. And it's this, again, there's this wooded area. And actually behind our backyard was a huge Christmas tree farm. So it was just woods and woods and woods, right? So he gets up to the entrance of these woods and there's these really thick bushes that you literally, like, the only way through is you have to like army crawl through them. So he gets down with his rifle. He army crawls through this little entry under these bushes to go into the woods to see this glowing light. He gets face to face with one of these entities again, but something flashed in his mind and he dropped his gun. And it flashed into his head this notion that we have to have compassion for all life, that it's not good to harm things, to kill things, that other things are suffering people. And he just went from instantaneously being this really, really hard, like masculine man, you know, getting in fights in his youth and, you know, just like every other rowdy guy that's, you know, out in the South hunting and, you know, just running game and, you know, like tough guy kind of mentality. He changed to where he cried. He would cry when he would talk about these things, or if he sees other people are suffering, he just turned into a big, soft, compassionate person after this. It was like a true, my dad changed forever. I'm telling you, it was the craziest thing. He never hunted again. He doesn't even kill bugs. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if he ever has since that moment, not intentionally. Sees a snake in the yard, he'll put it in a bucket or something and he'll drive it a few miles down the road and he'll drop it off. He just radically changed after this encounter. And so that was the initial 2007 experience. So like, to further answer your question, how it all started, like where it went from there. Yeah. So after that, a couple days later, me, my other two siblings and my mom, we came home. We had school, right? So I would get off the school bus many days because I was in the 8th grade at this time, in 2007, 13, right? So I would get off the school bus. My older brother, Jeremy, was in high school. My younger sister, Emily, was in elementary school. So we all got out at different times. So sometimes there would be, like the whole entire 8th grade, I would get off the bus and it would be me home alone for, you know, at least an hour or two. So a lot of times I'd go next door to my grandpa's and my grandma's and just watch TV with them and bond with them or whatever. And this day I get to my grandpa's house And he literally tells me, Michael, he says, boy, your daddy was out in the woods smoking dope and he saw some green booger men. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you ask him about it. Ask him about seeing green booger men. Because my dad was frantically telling everybody, oh my God, I saw these beings. That, like that's what happens when if you see a car wreck on the road or you see a train crash or an explosion and you're like, oh my God, you got to tell people about it. It's just, you know what I'm saying? So he was like that. He didn't even have the thought in his mind that people would not believe him. And my grandpa and my grandma thought he was crazy. My mom thought he was crazy. Everybody thought he was crazy except his kids and a very small number of people. And it was like very hard on our family for a long time. About 5 years, it was like hell. People called social services on him. When I was in the 8th grade after this, I had somebody who was like assigned to me and my brother, and they would come and sit with us for hours after school, and they would just ask us all these questions. I didn't know they were social workers. I thought they were like a therapist, and he would come, and sometimes we would just, for days and days and days, we would just sit there and play video games, and he'd ask me questions. Have you seen anything? Sometimes do you feel sad when you talk to your this, that, and the other? And someone literally called social services on my dad to have him evaluated, to have us taken away as kids because he came back saying he was seeing these things, right?
Yeah.
And
was he always at this point? Was he always thinking of them as extraterrestrials? Was he not sure what they were? Had he gone down, a little bit of a spoiler, but had he gone down the sort of spiritual explanation at this point, or was he just not sure?
No, I mean, I might have to find it here. I could do it maybe after if you want, because I don't want to sit here like looking through it, but I'll show you. I have the original report that he ever sent in 2007. And he literally says at the end, he's like, I think they're angelic. Wow. From the start, he's always had this sense that, the second night he was like, I'm going to kill it, because he didn't know, right? But then since then, he had the sense they were angelic, and he always has, and he has never changed that.
No, was your brother still terrified by it at this point?
Oh yeah, he was for a good like 10 or even longer years, like more than 10 years maybe. It was like, I think it was until I was 18 years old that we ever sat down and even talked about it again one-on-one as brothers, like me asking him questions and him answering. I think it was like I got home after the initial encounter. They told me all about it. My brother's telling me, I'm literally this 13-year-old kid, like, yeah, I believe you. Kids believe anything their parents tell them anyway. Sure. And he's telling me all this stuff, right? And then I literally think it was like 5 years later before we even talked about it again. If it came up, he would leave. He would get angry. He would get aggressive. I don't want to talk about it. People would come from all over. He would leave. He ran away a few times for months at a time, and it was like really hard on him. So it took 10 months from January of 2007 to even report the initial encounter to anyone, because he was so worried about losing his kids, losing his wife, his whole family falling apart. He didn't know what to do, but it was swelling up inside of him. He had to tell somebody. And we were watching TV one night, and there was this cheesy, like mid 2000s paranormal type show. Like, you remember Ghost Hunters and all those things?
Yeah.
They had UFO files, and we would begin to watch it like every night. Me and my siblings, Jeremy and Emily, and my dad, we would watch it like night after night. We thought we were learning about what happened to us, right? And there was this blurb at the end of an episode: if you've had a sighting, go to MUFON.com. So dad goes to MUFON.com. And in October of 2007, he finally types up his report. I think it even took him weeks or months after that to even hit send, if I'm not mistaken. But he sends it, and then the rest is history. They soon after that came to our property and literally made a Discovery Channel documentary about us with all these big promises that they were going to, present us as telling the truth, and that they were here to help us and to vindicate us. And then they basically smeared us. Spoiler alert, I later was told by the director of the spy program for the Central Intelligence Agency that it was a literal CIA operation to smear our family. We can get into that if you'd like, but it did not make it easy on us. Did not make it easy on us. And soon after that, sometime in, I think, if I'm remembering correctly here, I think it was summer of 2009. I was a 15-year-old kid at the time, so it's hard to remember exactly what month this happened. But soon after the documentary, NASA came knocking on our door. And they have been investigating us ever since. Now we've been investigated by CIA, NASA, Army intelligence, people in Air Force intelligence, naval intelligence, Homeland Security, DARPA, DIA, NSA, and it goes on and on. British intelligence, Canadian Royal
Hmm.
Intelligence,
How
Mossad.
how how are they? How are like foreign intelligence agencies? I mean, I just have. Please walk me through this in general, but how would like a foreign agency like have any grounds to come? Not, or do they not come physically, or how does that work?
It's a mix of both. Like people
Okay.
from Canadian intelligence have been to our house. Um, the people in like British intelligence, Mossad, um, Australian intelligence, and did I miss one? I'm not sure.
I
But these foreign agencies, they correspond with us, communicate with us,
okay.
ask us questions. I don't think, to my knowledge, I mean, I wouldn't know unless they told me, right? That some of these foreign assets have like come and seen us in person, but they ask us questions, keep tabs on us, make us aware that they're, paying attention. But then as far as like CIA, DIA, all these American intelligence agencies, they've been to the house. Some of them have door knocked and just showed up. Some of them have called and been like, "Can we come?" But we've literally like touched hands with all of the major intelligence agencies.
That's crazy. So how
And
many times have people just like been to your house that are like presenting them? I mean, I'm assuming that when I say presenting themselves, I don't mean like they're not. I just mean like they just show up and they're like, "Hey, I'm from whatever agency." Like how does this go?
realistically, um, as far as intelligence agency people coming to our house, I would say it's a few dozen.
Wow.
But I haven't lived there in a long time. I haven't even lived at home in 7 years. And I know dad will just text me and be like, "Hey, someone from Congress is here. Someone from NASA's here." I mean, I don't know. Maybe that number has grown from a few dozen, but like when I was growing up there until I was about 23, it was a few dozen.
Wow.
This guy, Hal Pobenmeyer, he would come stay at our house sometimes for a week at a time, 3 or 4 times a year. And that went on for 11 years. And that's just one guy, not to mention all the other times other individuals would come.
So is it pretty friendly, or is it like you sort of have to tell us this stuff, or what is the what is the general vibe?
Both. It's
Okay.
both. Some people have been super friendly and, we're just here to help. We think your story is important. We need you to get out and tell it because we're never going to tell it. That was told to us by Jim Simivan, the director of the spy program. Like basically like your story is so important. You got to write your book. You got to keep going forward. We are never going to tell the truth, Chris, because we're in too deep with lies and secrecy. And people would revolt if they knew how much we really were, covering this up and how many people have died over this subject. So someone's got to do it. That's one example of how they communicate to us. Another example is from people in the DIA. If you go tell your story a way that we don't like, we could put a bullet in your wife and son's brain, or we could run you off the road with a Mack truck and make you disappear and no one will even know where you went. So it's been a mixed bag. People threatening to kill
Wow.
us, people encouraging us. It's, I don't know. It's crazy.
That is crazy. I'm assuming you generally follow the sort of popular discourse in terms of what's going on with disclosure or not. But it seems like one of the most recent things that's been discussed in podcasts, in interviews, is all of Lou Elizondo's claims that it's like, look, there are people within the Pentagon who want disclosure, and there are people within the Pentagon who don't want disclosure. So it's like there are these sort of competing factions within these organizations. Is that how you deduce what's going on too, or what are your thoughts on it?
That is true. In my experience, in my literal lived experience, meeting people in these intelligence agencies, that is absolutely true. What we have been made aware of by people in intelligence agencies is that there are some people who worship Satan and they want to subjugate us all. And they really are into occult practices. All that stuff you hear theories about, it is true that there are maniacs in power who want to subjugate us and even kill us. And then there are other people who want to use their positions of power to get the truth out, and they think people deserve it. And I always like, as a pop culture reference for like my listeners, typically I liken it to Stranger Things season 4. Have you ever seen Stranger Things?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You remember when did you see season 4?
Yeah, I've seen all the way up until whatever's out. Yeah.
Do you remember when 11 lost her powers and like the whole
Yeah.
season? Yeah, and she kind of like is out of her mojo. So then there's this one agency that's like trying to kidnap her and kill her, but then the other government kind of organization is like, no, we got to help her get her powers back. And there's like this little secret war, and these government guys are shooting it's like that. They're not showing up on our property with guns. I don't think that they're legally allowed to do that. I think the movies fluff that up, and it's really a different story in real life. But it is like that. It is absolutely like that, that there are factions within the intelligence communities that it's like a snake with many heads, and not every head agrees. But at the end of the day, it does all go back to the same snake, right? So
what do you think about this narrative that you mentioned, like in passing, about there being, I don't know, for lack of a better term, dark forces or satanic forces? Do you think that that's that's literally true? Do you think that that's a exaggerated version of events? Do you think that I mean, one of the other things you hear is that there's like fundamentalist Christian groups within the government who want to spin, things that essentially just jive with biblical interpretations of everything. Like, what do you think is going on there?
I think it's both. I do think it is literally true that there are people who worship Satan. And then if we had like a higher philosophical conversation, it's like, well, maybe there isn't a Satan, maybe it's these egregores of these negative psychic forces that have manifested over time. That's fine. You don't have to believe in one central evil force. The point here is that there is a force. There is a dark force. I don't care about the name of it. And I'll tell you why I came to that conclusion, other than people in the intelligence agencies making us aware that those practices do actually happen, telling us things like, for example, they're in the Illuminati, telling us things like, for example, they want us to go to Bohemian Grove, and telling us, for example, that there are like people who worship the dark force, and they even talked about shapeshifters and things like that. But where we went from 2007, right? We went through this period that my family calls the 5 years of darkness following the initial encounter. I'm going to get to your question with a little story. So hang with me here. We went through the 5 years of darkness up until 2012. It got so bad that, we would be bullied at school. My sister comes home crying Good Friday before Easter of 2012. And, someone at school made a mean comment. So my dad's like, that's it. I'm sick of this phenomenon, which, by the way, never stopped appearing. It was within weeks of that initial encounter that us kids saw it, and we like always knew it was a thing. We never had, doubts about it. Like, we were seeing it as a family the whole time. But people would come around, and the doubters or the skeptics, like, they wouldn't see it. We couldn't film it. It just wasn't interacting with us in a way that was like necessarily helping us. It was kind of stringing us along at the time. So back to the story, my sister comes home crying. My dad's like, I'm done with this. I'm never going to go talk about this again. He's kind of cursing this guy. He's like, thank you for healing me. I did forget to mention that, but on that original night, his Crohn's disease went away and he was in complete remission. Never took a medication again.
Yeah.
Thank you for healing me, but I'm done with this. I'm never going to go talk about you again. You won't even let you me film you. My kids are coming home crying. I can't do this anymore. And the night of Easter Sunday at 3 a.m, my dad is awakened by this voice, and it says, arise. He gets out of bed, and he's instructed to get dressed and go outside. And he goes outside, and there's these tall beings standing there, and it hands him this thing. It's like, the way my dad has always described it to me is kind of, if you imagine a little chihuahua, this tiny little body, but it doesn't have a head or a tail or legs or any other distinguishable features. It's just kind of this little fleshy thing. And it had these spikes all over it. And when he would hold it, it would like gnash at him and kind of hurt his hands and prick at him. And it was really like aggressive. And the being was like, this is your burden. Do not lose this. Keep track of this. So my dad's walking through the woods. He gets to those kennels I was telling you about earlier. He opens the kennel. He throws it in there. Now, before I move on, I want to say that later, through hypnotic regression, he realized, right, that this object was symbolic. A lot of people over the years have been like, what was it? What was it? And we weren't sure, right? He never saw it again. But he later came to understand that the object was symbolic, and that it represented humankind being lost without head or tail, having no direction where to go, and the whole gnashing and the pricking was like we're suffering, we don't know where we're going, right? But anyway, he throws the thing in the kennel. He feels a gust of wind. He turns around. He sees this bull, right? This ethereal, ghostly bull. It charges through him, and this massive gust of wind knocks him on his back. He falls to the ground. He sees the stars through the bull as it's going over him. He's like, it's, in his head, it's like a ghost. It's this spiritual thing, right? When he turns over and he gets up on his hands and knees to stand up, the bull is gone, but he sees this woman with blonde hair and blue eyes in a white, it's like a gown that's from her neck all the way down to her ankles, and it's twinkling like the stars. She's floating off the ground and she's glowing. And she looks at him and she says, "You know why I'm here." But she doesn't move her mouth. Anytime these entities ever spoke, it's that they don't move their mouth. It's in your mind. She said, "You know why I'm here." She said, "I'm the divine feminine. It's a great secret that's been hidden for throughout all time. It's been suppressed." And she made him to understand it in the sense that, like, for example, the Catholic Church has Mary. Even they have a divine feminine, but they took this concept and they turned her into a human. They suppressed the idea that the feminine can be divine, but she's part of the human world. So Jesus is the Son of God, right? But the mother is only human. There's no divinity there, but yet she's still worshipped for thousands of years. It's this very complicated, confusing thing. She said that her name is Hathor, but that throughout time she has gone by many names and is known across the world, across various cultures. Basically, that to summarize the things that she said, there is a group in power who worships the dark force. This is getting to your question. This is why I told this story. There's a group in power who worships the dark force, and they are using the biblical book of Revelations to script the end of times. Wow. They're trying to force prophecy on mankind.
Holy
and
shit.
Like it's a playbook, right? She said, "As it is written, so shall it be," that the prophecies will play out, but that it was written thousands of years ago that the light would win, and that that there will be intervention, that we're approaching a new age. She said, we're going to shift into the age of Aquarius, and there will be a new knowledge, and there will be peace, that we will have a connection with God and the divine forces. But that in order to do this, we have to change to love, compassion. She flashed it in his mind to understand that everything has a consciousness. The blades of grass, the water, the wind, everything is alive. It has a spirit, and that we have to be loving towards spirit and, compassionate. She said that we have two polarities, that there is love and there is fear, and that right now the earth is in a state of fear and it's suffering. And that if this goes on too long and the collective humanity stays in this condition of fear, that the earth, being this advanced living being that it is encoded to protect itself, and that it might just shake us off and get rid of us. But that we have the responsibility to change our vibration to love, to save ourselves and to save the world. And that basically, she said, you have to go forward. You have to tell your story. If you don't, you will have blood on your hands like Joel the Watchman. You will be guilty for lives lost. And this is your burden. If you do this, your family will be protected. We will bring you cameras and witnesses and help you collect evidence to show the world undeniable proof that, there is life out there. She said they come from the eternal world or the spirit world, that when we die, we become as they are, and that our loved ones are always around us, watching us, cheering us on, and that this is the perilous world where the soul comes on a journey to learn and to grow.
Yeah.
And it's just, it goes on, but yeah. And then she vanished, and he changed
Man.
from then too.
Man. So I think this is a good point in this whole tale, that, if anybody out there is like me, I think the first time I heard a version of this was your dad talking on some podcast. And it's like, if you're a critically thinking person, of course you're going to question elements of this story. And then it's not just one thing, it's one thing after another, after another, after another. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's many details you didn't tell that just would enhance what I'm saying. However, we haven't even gotten to the things you've personally experienced yet, and
Yeah.
what's happened to you and what is happening to you. But I think now would be a good time to interject that the thing that made me really want to talk to you is that I have two personal friends who have spent time with either you or you and your dad, who both have had experiences
Yeah.
with this phenomenon to varying degrees. And that's what really got me to take notice and be like, okay, if they're saying there's something going on, I've got to take a whole other look at this story and really start to begin to take it seriously, and not just like, well, it's another one of those stories that maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, maybe it's a mixture of true and not true, all of the ways I think just a critically thinking person would approach these things. But then once again, when you have friends who you trust pretty implicitly have these experiences themselves, it really changes things. So, with that, what has your experience been? And when did it really start to not impact your life just indirectly, but directly? And let's start there. Yeah.
Okay. Before I answer this question, I have one more little blurb that I
Sure,
forgot
sure.
to mention, and it's important. And then we're going to move on to the question. And it's a great question, too. Um, one of the most important things that we call her the lady, right?
Hmm.
Because we just, it's just comfortable to us. It's just the first thing he called her, right? We don't call her Hathor. People around the world are like, Hathor, Hathor. That's fine, but we just call her the lady, right? So the one of the most important things she said is that there's going to be a star alignment that will mark the shift into the new knowledge, the shift when God will return. And she said, when the star Regulus aligns with the gaze of the Sphinx just before dawn in the constellation Leo, there will be a new knowledge. So we have some friends in NASA, and we told them that. And Dad's even like written that down and sent it to the Pentagon. By the way, we reported that to the Pentagon, and the president was briefed on that in 2012, right? Have you noticed in the past 2 or 3 years, you have people like Lou Elizondo and John Ramirez and other people in intelligence agencies coming out saying there's a consciousness shifting event pending. Maybe it's in 2025. Maybe it's in 2027. I'm just saying, something to take notice of. Dive down that rabbit hole. We've been
S-
saying that for 12 years. But
So, is
anyway,
that when that alignment is speculated to happen?
they told us they believe, based on their NASA simulations, that that alignment will occur on the um, equinox of 2026, the spring equinox.
Okay.
But they're muddying the waters, and they're saying either 2025 or 2027. That's just how the
Hmm.
government works. They take a little kernel of truth and then they puke on it with lies. But anyway, back to your
And do
question.
you think? Like, sorry, I just want to. I'm just dying to ask this.
It's
Is
okay.
there's been so many occasions of people predicting good things happening on certain dates, bad things happening on certain dates. Do you think that this is going to be undeniable and instantaneous, or do you think this is going to be one of those things that sort of unfolds over time, or do
Yeah.
you just not know?
The second one. I think it's the
Okay.
second one. I think that I think that we're primed because of like movies to think that there's just going
Right.
to be like some fire in the sky and the whole world is going to, be aware of it. I don't think it's like that. I think it's things that are unfolding right now. I think that there is a major shift in consciousness happening right now. And if you want my personal belief, Michael, I think we're already in the age of Aquarius, and I think it officially began of the eclipse, on the eclipse this past April, because of the experiences I've been having in my personal life have been insane. And that brings us back to your next question. But since that eclipse, things have been radically changed. Culminating to, for example, 2 weeks ago, we had a crowd of 200 people on the beach for 2 nights in a row with us. And that weekend, we saw over 150 orbs, and we saw these orbs appear with wings. People were freaking out, dude. It was insane. And me and my family are like, yes, these are the kind of things we see in private. Now a whole horde of hundreds of people are having a mass sighting with us, you know?
So when
Um,
you say wings, what do you mean? Like actual like wings? What do they look like?
they were these glowing golden. I'll tell you how they appeared and how they changed. They looked like these four thin bars, just like these rectangles. I was looking
Hmm.
straight up. We have a crowd of 200 people. I'm trying to like teach the people how to skywatch. I'm on a swivel trying to point it out to 200
Mhm.
people, and I'm looking straight up. People are looking in all these different directions, and when we would see them, it would be like, everybody look to the right, you know, and like kind of get the minds of everybody on the same spot. So I saw it first, and a few other people have reported to me later that they saw it first with me and reported the exact same thing that I saw. So I'm seeing it for a few seconds, and it was four kind of like glowing rectangles. And they kind of swooped down lower, and they started getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And I shouted at everybody, everybody, look up. And when we looked up, they changed and they had wings and they were flapping. They literally were these glowing golden, you could say orbs, but they weren't spheres. They were like these glowing beings of light with flapping wings, and
Wow.
everyone's freaking out. I'll send you a video.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that this video was captured with an infrared camera, so it has a
Okay.
pink color on any light source that it is picking up. But also keep in mind that this is an infrared camera and it is detecting light sources. And anything that it would be, if it was, regular birds, like people say, it would be a dark shadow. It wouldn't be reflecting a light source in an infrared camera. But I mean, beyond that, 200 people, saw it there together. It appeared, and I shouted to the crowd, "Those are not birds!" And right when I said that, they disappeared. And I knew they weren't birds because 2 nights before that, my sister and I saw two other orbs appear actually very close to us at ground level on the beach. And they were these round orbs with these little wings, and they kind of like swooped in a helix pattern, and then they disappeared. And there's been other times. I have this really good friend named Tom Barber. He is the vocalist of actually my two favorite bands. You might not expect this about me, but I like really heavy metal music.
Dude, I
And
listen to heavy music too. Yeah,
oh,
yeah, keep
really?
going. Yeah.
Do you know Chelsea Grin?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, well, this is the vocalist of Chelsea Grin.
Crazy. Crazy.
Yeah, I
Cool.
need to link you guys up. He's a wonderful human being, and we're really good friends, and we live basically in the same town. And he has skywatched with me dozens of times. He was there that night. He saw this with me, but the reason I bring him up is the first time I ever saw orbs with wings was with him. He was at my property with my dad and I, and we were sitting in these we have these zero G chairs where so we can sit back and look up without the strain on our neck because we do it so
Hmm.
much. And I'm telling you, Michael, I will connect you with him. He would be happy to meet you, and you can ask him yourself, and he will tell you that we saw orbs with wings swoop down 5 to 10 feet in front of our faces. So this is not a phenomenon that is new to me. So when we were on the beach with those 200 people, I knew what we were seeing, which is why I shouted, "Those are not birds!" And right when I said that, they vanished. So yeah, so I mean, I could go on and on to answer
Yeah.
your actual question, like how did this become a direct thing for me? Um, so it all started, like I said, when I was 13. My dad told me immediately. I knew he was telling the truth, and I felt so sorry for him and my brother and how they were treated. And my aunts and uncles would come and tell us, "It's crazy. Don't talk about it. Your dad and your brother are liars," and all this horrible treatment. And I knew that I wanted to help them, that I wanted to dedicate my life to helping them and vindicating them and telling this story on behalf of them.
Yeah.
And I always had experiences with my dad. A lot of times my brother wasn't around for these experiences because it freaked him out so bad initially. Like I said, he ran away. He struggled for a long time. So it would be like me, my dad, sometimes my brother Jeremy, my sister Emily.
Hmm.
My mom would see things, still does to this day, and she would maintain, I don't believe it, I don't believe it, denial. But when it really kicked off for me, I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college. That December, I went to the first ever like conference kind of thing with my dad because I was an adult at this point. I was out of high school. I had more free time, and we drove to South Carolina and did a little conference, and I spoke in front of people. And it really like was reinforcement to me that, okay, we're, meant to do this kind of thing. Comfortable doing this. It's enriching to me. So by the time April comes around, which is when the lady thing happened, I was the first person Dad told. So sometime about 2 weeks after that happened, which remember it was Easter Sunday of 2012, a couple weeks later, towards the end of April, we drive to Asheville, North Carolina, and we do this MUFON conference, and it's the first place he ever tells the story of the lady. And I watched him get heckled by the crowd of anywhere from 50 to 75 people. And they're shouting, boo, we don't want to hear this. We want to hear about the river, the thing they saw on TV. My dad starts crying. He literally just starts crying. He's like, he's stunned. He's just trying to tell this experience that just happened to him. Nobody wanted to hear it. There was a professor there who was a religious studies scholar. She's written a book that some people might know about called American Cosmic.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was there.
Diana Salka, right?
Yep. We later found out that she orchestrated the whole thing covertly just to meet us and invited us there. She arranged that and a lot of things like that she did. But she took it seriously. We got involved with her for a little while, studying this, religious angle of things. And, next thing you know, the CIA, people in the CIA, the NRO, NASA are coming to our house and saying, we have been, or rather I have been, assigned to investigate you, to understand the UFO phenomenon from a spiritual lens, that you are the guy that I have to come investigate so that I can understand this better. Right.
And this was which organization?
Well, it's hard to say because some of these people double and triple dip in agencies. It was a guy by the name Tim Taylor.
This guy. Okay.
Yeah. And he was an NRO person, which is the National Reconnaissance Office, but it's also a joint operation between the CIA, NASA, and Air Force. So you're kind of like in all three. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and this is the guy who at various times whose real name was not being used, right?
Yeah, in her book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. They call him like Tyler Durden or something like that, like some Fight Club nickname. I'm not into all that. I'm not all into, people are coming to our house and investigating us and asking us our questions and invading our privacy. I'm like, you know what, man?
Well, on a related note with this stuff, and you having a range of experiences with these agencies, have they ever threatened you or your family with, don't talk about this? You can talk about this, but do not ever mention that. Is there anything like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that same guy I was telling you about, for example, he came to our house in 2013, and he had a laptop, and it was like this PowerPoint that was like for the Bledsoe family only, Bledsoe's eyes only. And he showed us all this stuff. He showed us like pictures of inside of Area 51 with nothing, by the way. There was no craft. There was no beings. It was just pictures of hallways and stuff like that. And a picture of a door that's 10 foot tall. He's like, why do you think it's 10 foot tall? And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. You know what I mean? Like, but and then he was like, basically, you guys are really lucky because if you had been telling all these stories 6 years before, we could have shot and killed you and got away with it. But we don't really do that anymore. We can make you suffer and ruin your life in different ways now that don't involve killing you and making you disappear. We would prefer that you don't go talk about this with anyone. Don't go post this on Facebook. Don't ever go talk about this stuff publicly. But you know what? If you do, they're going to think you're crazy anyway. So what's the point? We're going to be tapping you for the rest of your life. We're going to be training spy satellites over you for the rest of your life. We're going to have a team of people remote viewing you for the rest of your life. Your phones will be bugged. We'll put bugs in your light bulbs and in your ceiling fans and everywhere. So just be aware of that. That's the kind of stuff that they would tell us for many years. Since I was 15.
This guy that you just named?
Multiple different guys were saying these things. Yeah, but this guy that I just named did say The thing about we're going to have a team of people remote viewing you, psychically spying on you. We're
Wow.
going to have satellites trained on you. Your phone will be tapped.
Dude, the levels of paranoia, I would fucking, wow.
So I finally broke free from that paranoia at about 27 years old, which is when I started the podcast. You know, you could see the timeline of events of when I realized they're not doing anything. And even if they are, I don't care. I'm going to do my own thing. Yeah. So back to your question, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had been having these experiences, and when it really kicked off for me, like I said, I was 18. I had just found out that Dad had this experience with the lady. We went to a conference in Asheville in April, and he's telling me all about it, and it totally shifted my understanding of what this all meant. Now, granted, Michael, I was a Pentecostal holiness Christian.
Right.
That's how I was raised. For those who don't know about Pentecostal holiness, it is one of the most extreme forms of Christianity on the planet. Literally. It's like 2 levels under Amish. I'm not even kidding. And that's how I was raised, yet I had the shock of having these mystical experiences with spiritual entities. So I'm like really trying to understand it all, but it's like hurting me on the inside because I can't ignore my original programming, but I'm learning these things and I know they're true because I'm seeing them, right? So
When's the first time you saw it, by the way? Like what age?
13, like weeks after.
Okay.
Yeah, like right away. We were seeing orbs and all kinds of things.
Okay.
Little shadowy beings run around the house, and my brother and my mom locked eyes with an entity, like a 7 to 8 foot tall entity, and there was all kinds of poltergeist activity, like things going crash in the other room, light bulbs getting unscrewed, and lights switching on and off. All kinds of crazy supernatural stuff happened. But at 18 is when I really. So by that summer, after the conference with my dad, where he broke the story about the lady, after it happening and all that, I began to get really furious. Like, Dad, it's been 5 years. Why did Chris Jr. get to have these experiences face to face with these beings, but I didn't get to? He didn't even want it. I want it. There were many nights I would walk outside and I would even walk to the woods and hope to see something in there. Like, I want to see them. I want to see them face to face. Why can't I have this? And Dad was like, you don't understand, son. You're not ready. It will happen when you're ready. This is a spiritual thing. They're not aliens flying around in saucers. They are magical beings. They know your thoughts. They know what you're going to do before you do it. They know where you're going to look. He's telling me all this stuff and I'm having a hard time with it. I'm like, no, they come in UFOs. That doesn't make sense. They're aliens, but they talked about, I didn't even go into the missing 4 hours, right? They talked about working for creation and being the guardians, but they have to be aliens, right? I couldn't understand. And he's telling me, he's like, they're not aliens. They're not up there with a magnifying glass, looking down at you with radio receivers, listening to you and waiting for them. They know your thoughts. It's a connection. And when you understand that, then you'll get it. Then you'll begin to have your experiences. He said, God's time is not like our time. There's this old saying in the Bible that he would always quote to me, that a day to God can be like 1,000 years to us. And he was like, you have to understand you're on God's time, that it can take a long time from our perspective for things to unfold. And you have to be patient and you just have to understand that connection. And I'm like really not buying the answer. I'm really just kind of like wanting to have an experience. And then we hear cows start mooing at us. And 4 or 5, I say 4 or 5 because one would moo and then 2 other ones would moo and then 3 would go at the same time. It was like multiple. It was like a chorus of cows all around us, some to the right, some to the left, some in front of us, behind us. And we're looking around and we're stunned for several minutes. This is so loud we can't even talk. And there's no cows. There's no cows for 5 to 10 miles, right?
Wow.
So my dad looks at me. He's like, see, they're magical. And I'm like, no, dude, it took me 5 years to undo the denial of this until I was about 23 to
That's wild.
I knew deep down that it was a supernatural experience, but the part that I struggled with was why would they do something humorous like moo at me like a cow because they appeared as a bull. The lady did, there's symbolism there. And
just
I had
to interject, I just because you may not have heard this, maybe you have, but when you start looking in a lot of accounts from antiquity about how divinity shows up during like theurgic rituals or rituals that have to do with kind of evoking, different archetypal deities, they have like a retinue that shows up. So, like from the Greek perspective, they would say like almost think of it like a kind of archetypal spiritual hierarchy, where at the very top of a hierarchy you have like this source of a very specific kind of archetypal spirituality. And as that force emanates outward, there are like these other beings and consciousnesses that emanate out from that thing. So when you're doing these rituals and they start to show up, it's like actually a retinue of beings that shows up. It's not just like this one thing shows up. It's like you might hear things like what you're talking about, like these, like it's almost like it's a herd or something of that's her herd or something that shows up when she's near or when she's showing up. So that just made me think of that right away.
So retinue means like a group or like
Yeah,
multiple? Yeah,
there's like a whole group or like a parade of beings that starts to show up.
like
Yeah.
a council.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. I didn't think about it in those terms. But yeah, that was the hardest part for me to grasp, was that they're humorous and that they can be silly and playful. And so shortly after that year, my dad tells me he had a vision. He said, "You are going to be the one to tell our story. You're going to write a book." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to write a book. I'm a talker. I like to talk, if you couldn't tell." And I was like, "I don't know, Dad. Like, maybe, but I don't think I have the skills to write a book." And he was like, "You're going to be the one. You're going to be the one to carry the story forward." And granted, he told me that 12 years ago. So that sat with me in the back of my mind for all those years, that he felt like I was going to help him carry this forward. And a sequence of events led me to start the podcast. Bledsoe Said So, which I haven't talked about yet. In 2021, because I thought maybe he saw a book, but it just came through in an abstract way that I would be going forward. It's like,
Mhm.
we're talking about, seeing the future here. It can sometimes appear one way and be slightly different. So I was like, maybe it has nothing to do with a book, but he didn't know what a podcast was at the time. Right. So I start, doing the podcast and getting out there and trying to go forward full steam ahead. And he did end up writing a book,
Yeah.
UFO of God, which came out last year in February. And if you don't have a copy, I'd love to send you one as a gift. But yeah, and just things progressed, and he basically told me, like, someday I'm gonna not be here anymore. And he's like, by the time you're my age, you're gonna really, help people with this and help people understand this. So he's kind of always been guiding me to go forward and do
Yeah.
this. So that's really how I got involved. To answer your question from like 30 minutes ago.
No, man, it's
But
it's a winding story, and it totally makes sense that you need to r tell all of the important parts of it, and you did a really good job, man, because it's so easy
thank
on
you.
my show to dip in and out of things, and I was really trying to hold back throughout a lot of the story so you could just tell the story. But I think we're at a good point now where one of the things that I really think we're gonna connect over, and we already started to connect over, is you've become interested in sort of deepening your understanding of the esoteric and how to talk about the spiritual phenomenon in a way that goes outside just the most easily culturally available terminology and words. And you said that you were Pentecostal. My
Yeah.
understanding is now you've moved on to sort of a way of looking at spiritual phenomenon that goes well outside of that. I know you've mentioned like you're interested in hermeticism, for instance. How has diving into that stuff changed or enhanced your understanding of whatever's going on?
Okay. That is a very good question. And yeah, I would say now I don't really mess with labels that much, but if I had to just pick a random label, I'd probably say, like, yeah, I'm a hermeticist. I'm a mystically inclined individual. I don't know what I am, right? But that's what I'm
Yeah.
into. And yeah, so that whole dive into the esoteric really hit home for me in my early 20s, about 23. So again, the lady came when I was 18, and she said a
Mhm.
lot of things that I didn't understand. I had never heard of the divine feminine. Something else I forgot to say earlier is she said that Amun Ra is the hidden one. So you have to imagine this being comes down. She also gave the name Pitta. This
Hmm.
being comes down. She gives 3 Egyptian names. So on the one hand, I'm like, I know this is true. I'm seeing all these things. I hadn't seen the lady myself, but I know Dad's telling me the truth. I know every other thing we've seen together. I know it's all real. So I'm like, but then on the other hand, I'm Pentecostal, and my pastor says all that stuff's evil. My pastor
Yeah.
said you can't even do yoga because a demon will
Hmm.
get into you. You know, or if you do martial arts, you go to a trance and a demon will possess you. So in my head, I'm like really struggling with this whole Egyptian thing. What does that mean? What does that
Yeah.
mean? Amun Ra. What does that mean? And so I start finding out about these esoteric things at 18 years old. Just digging and digging and digging. I find out about the Illuminati. I find out about, the Freemasons and the concept that there are secret mystical traditions that are really old. And obviously, I think if you're a Christian originally, I think the first level of every individual who discovers this concept that there are secret societies, the first level is they're demonic, they're evil,
Right.
they're
Right.
satanic. And some of them are, but not all of them, right? You know that. So my first level was there's something to this, but the Freemasons run the world, and who knows, maybe that's true. But that was my first thought. Illuminati, all the initial levels of getting into this stuff, but knowing deep down that there's something to this mystical knowledge. Because after my dad's experiences, for example, he starts becoming obsessed with reincarnation. And now I'm 16 years old at some point, and he starts trying to tell me about reincarnation. And I think it's
Yeah.
silly. I don't understand it. He starts to tell me all kinds of stuff that wasn't a part of my Christian programming, right? So it's like there were two parts of me. There were two parts of my soul. The one that grew up Christian, and then the one that knew that there was something more. And I was seeking something more. And I knew it was
Hmm.
true, but it's like a part of me was latched on to this Pentecostal programming. So finally, at about 22 or 23 years old, it's hard for me to remember exactly, but I know I was in my early 20s. Um, I I saw a being in my room with my friend Alex. I want to say I was 22. And it was we were just kind of home for the summer. He moved away after we got out of high school, and he never moved back to Fayetteville. He's lived all around. So like he would come home sometimes in the summer, and we would stay up all night. We would hang out and catch up and whatever. And we're sitting in the room one night, and we're talking about all these things. And I was very lucky because my buddy Alex grew up with a military dad, and they moved all across the country. And at 2 different houses that he lived in, they were haunted. So he was already into this stuff. He was already seeing ghosts as a kid and just believed me from the start. And I always felt that level of like, we can talk about this and it's safe.
Yeah.
We're talking about the beings, whatever. And something touches me. Something invisible touches me. And it's like, it feels hot. And I lift my shirt and I show him, and there's a red mark on my ribs, and his eyes are really wide. And then we look in the corner, and there's a being standing there, exactly like my dad and my brother described, like the painting I sent you. But it was
Wow.
completely translucent. It was like when the predator cloaks,
Yeah.
you see the shimmer. It
Yeah.
was standing there, and it was kind of like shimmering, and I could see round eyes and a round head and a little shape. And my buddy sees it, it disappears, and then immediately we lock eyes. And he's like, "Did you just see that?" And I was like, "Yeah, you did." And we both knew it was like, "Oh my God, we really saw that." And at that point on, I think the experiences started getting a lot more close and a lot more intimate. And by this point, the CIA was really coming around a lot. We had been flying to different places in the country to go have like private parties with CIA program directors and bar mitzvahs with Washington, D.C. power brokers and people like courting us all over the place, trying to get information out of us. And it's a whole other story.
What? Just on that note, though, what's the craziest thing that you've personally gone to or done? And if you can't reveal certain details,
No,
that's fine. But like,
dude, I'm all about it. I am all about it. The crazy, it depends on your perspective, because obviously the craziest thing is the supernatural experiences.
Sure,
But
sure.
but if
Yes.
you're asking more so with like government type people,
Yeah.
probably the craziest thing I've done was go to a bar mitzvah in New York City where the director of the CIA was there and multiple other CIA operatives, and also the director of the spy program, who is the guy I talked about earlier, Jim Simivan. I've known him for a number of years, and other people in Washington D.C. that are like power brokers, and like this kid whose bar mitzvahs it was, his best friend was like Bo Biden's son, and really
Whoa.
connected individuals. Like that was pretty crazy.
Do
Um,
these people had these people ever said like, "Oh yeah, I know the Bledsoes"? Like, do they openly, publicly admit to being affiliated with you guys?
some of them, yeah, like Jim
Cool,
Simivan has. Um,
cool.
Although I don't really necessarily like the way he talks about the phenomenon all the time. He puts kind of a negative spin on it, but that's fine. He's free to do that if that's what he. At least he acknowledges that we're telling the truth. That's fine. That's very much appreciated. But then on the other hand, Lou Elizondo, who has interacted with my dad in private, in person, and says, Chris, we believe you. We have your back. What you're doing is so important, and all this blah, 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 blah. And then publicly acts like he barely even knows us and acts like he can't substantiate we're telling the truth. And then writes a book and goes and says that there are certain color orbs that are evil and they'll kill you. So stay away. And we could go on and on and on about the government agenda and how they act to us in private, and then how they talk about this stuff in public, and they're
Hmm.
not congruent, which is why I say what I say about the government and their agenda, but that's another conversation. Um, John Alexander, Colonel John Alexander from the Project Stargate, the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats is
Yeah,
based on him. He goes and he acknowledges us publicly all the time, and he's been a big help to us. He's actually been on TV with us on the History Channel and has
cool.
not been out there and tried to smear us or anything like that. He's been very kind and very generous in the way that he acknowledges us publicly, and for that I am very thankful. um, yeah, I can't remember.
Hmm. That's all right. We were starting to talk about, different ways to think about this stuff and talk about this stuff. And I mean, my head is like swimming with references and things I could bring up and things um I'm wondering if you thought of. But, one of the ideas that, well, two things that I'll mention quick. One, I think it's interesting that you're feeling pulled into Hermeticism, because that is
Oh,
a kind of
that's where we were going.
Greco Egyptian um thing, right? So like if you read the Corpus Hermeticum, it's always talked about in a sort of Egyptian context, and historically it's debatable, when these things come from. Most people think it's around, like the turn of the millennium, like common era time, first couple of centuries common era time. But one of the ideas that is all throughout Hermeticism and then earlier Platonism is this idea that the true reality is what they call nous,
Yeah.
which we usually translate into English as mind, right? So, and then, I was just talking to this scholar that you would absolutely love. I mentioned him to you. He has this podcast called "The Secret History of Western Esotericism," and there's this whole passage in the Corpus Hermeticum about being reborn into nous, into some kind of, again, cosmic mind, cosmic consciousness that we're in a sense already in, but we're also kind of blind to as individual beings, right? And there's this whole thing where I believe it's Hermes is giving this speech to his student, and he's telling him, basically, what can I say? I've been reborn into a sort of different reality, and you too can be reborn into this reality. And what it is not some nebulous thing like, accept this as your savior or that or whatever. It's you're literally reborn into a different perspective that is no longer consistent with your physical body that will age out and die. It's like you have some kind of direct awareness that you belong to this eternal realm of mind, and like your soul is already of that thing and in that thing. So you're talking about, beings that seemingly can transcend space and time, and distance to them is nothing.
Hmm.
And right now, I think most people would reach to like some weird physics, right? Like, are they in the quantum realm? Are they maybe, or maybe the ancients are right. And these are beings that already exist as like souls in the realm of nous, in the realm of mind. So to them, they're already in a layer of reality that's more primary than where we are physically, right? But we're still in that. But to us, it's like, there's also this, just I was just reading this for a video I'm working on. There's this whole dope speech by Socrates in the Phaedo, and this is just before Socrates is put to death. And he's talking about, we don't live in the true earth. We're like crustaceans at the bottom of the ocean looking up through the water. We see the night sky, right? But if we were able to fly up to the top of the water and poke our heads out, we would be like, holy shit, the world is so much more clear and beautiful and different than this murky, soup I was looking through.
Yeah.
So he's hinting at this as well. And he straight up says that, in this purer realm, it's beings who are souls and they're not living with physical bodies. So, I mean, you just see evidence of this stuff all over the place, that the Greeks, of course, the Indians, the Egyptians, the Chaldeans, the Syrians, they all knew, or they all had this metaphysical framework that the physical world is an epiphenomenon, a much lower slice of reality than this
Yeah.
realm
It's a
of
shadow.
consciousness. Yeah,
A shadow.
exactly.
I think that's very geniusly put. Like, I think that is just, I really think we're on the same page, Michael, like about all of, I've never met anybody quite like you who has like the exact flair for this stuff that I have. So I appreciate all your input. I'm really, I'm really happy we were connected, dude, for real.
Thanks, man.
I think for the listener out there, if they want, and you're listening, your audience, probably knows this already, but I just feel compelled to push this on people, and share and share and share. But a really, really good book that makes this point is The Secret Teaching of All Ages. We were
Yeah.
talking about this last week, remember?
Yeah, Manly P. Hall. Yeah.
I think it's one of the best books I've ever read that makes the case. Thinking of myself as that 18-year-old kid, what do the Masons believe? What do the, this group believe and this group believe? And
Yeah.
feeling like, I want to know. Dude, it's so easy to know. You just got to look. And I think The Secret Teaching of All Ages does just a fantastic point of giving you that overview of showing
Yes.
you what they all believed, which is exactly what you just said, which is like, we're not in the real world. The real world is somewhere else.
Yeah.
You're in a little simulation. You're in a little experience. And when you die, you don't die. You just enter a doorway into another place where you are now immortal. I mean, you're immortal now, but then you go into eternity, in the other world. I think like the great challenge that mankind has not overcome yet is definitively knowing that
Right.
we are immortal and we come from another place and that we are only here for a brief moment in time. And there's a lot of people listening. They're like, I already know that. Okay, great. You have made it. You are awake. You are aware of what it is that you came here to know. But think about pop culture. Think about CNN, Fox News, all of these other media organizations. They're not talking about this stuff. Movies aren't really talking about this stuff. And if they are, it's symbolic and it's subtle, right? It's an outlier. Scientific organizations and institutions, they're not talking about this stuff. This stuff is not accepted in the mainstream. That's the challenge, is like, how do we get the whole world to know this great secret, the secret teaching of all ages, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's what the true initiation is. If you like the Theosophical approach from Helena Blavatsky, it's,
Right.
I think it has some really cool stuff to it. Like, the first initiation is that whatever lifetime you're in, that kernel of knowing that you want to be good, that you have the desire. And then I think it was like I can't remember, but there's like 5 initiation stages of the soul, and they can occur at different points throughout different lifetimes. But
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't need to go into a theosophy
No, no,
tangent.
I'm not as I'm aware of Theosophy and Helena Blavatsky, but I haven't read like her, Isis Revealed, and like I haven't done like the deep dive into her personal philosophy. I know that it's all really heavily influenced by a lot of the ancient Greek stuff, and like, for people that
Hermetics
aren't,
too.
yeah, 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 for people who don't know about the Theosophists, these are people who, earlyish 20th century, they're really starting to knit together all of these ideas from the world's spiritual traditions, and you get a variety of famous thinkers who kind of belong to this movement broadly or directly for periods of time, and then some leave, some stay, whatever, but very influential in the whole Western spiritual outlook, and you know uh, become very influential on the New Age and uh, movement and all of that kind of stuff. But anyway, um, yeah, and your dad's obsession with reincarnation, it makes so much sense to me, because again, this is another thing that you'll find it almost universally, ubiquitously throughout the world's spiritual traditions. I mean, a lot of people don't know this is deeply a Western idea as well. Like all of the Greeks believed in like metempsychosis or reincarnation. Obviously, it's all throughout the Eastern um, spiritual traditions as well. So the idea that that's like an Eastern idea is, it's very strange, because if you it's very clear in Plato, very clear.
Egyptians believed it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because you do get debate on whether or not it's a good thing to be reincarnated. You do get debate on what happens after you die. But one thing there really is no debate on is that you do have an immortal soul underneath everything that's going through these cycles of creating, like there's this great book called Theurgy and the Soul by a classicist, or I can't remember if he's for sure a classicist or a religious scholar, but his name's Gregory Shaw. Brilliant, really open-minded guy. And I mean, dude, the footnotes in this book are just a sight to behold. Like, I mean, I could not imagine reading all of these footnotes that he's citing in this book, let alone writing this book. But one of the things he talks about that you'll probably dig this. So there's this Greek word synthema,
Ooh.
and synthema means something like a token of something. So this is an idea definitely in the Hermetic tradition, but um, the idea is essentially that there's this network of correspondences, right? The really broad, like nutshelled version of this is the as above, so below adage. But what does that really mean? What it means is that there is essentially this hidden network of archetypal forces that is imbued all throughout reality. So, flowers, stones, animals, whatever, they're all soaked in some kind of synthema, meaning like they are related to something higher that is like divine, archetypal, whatever, and so are we. And in this book, Theurgy and the Soul, he says the physical body is a synthema of your soul.
Wow.
So it's like that idea just blew my brain open in terms of like what is this thing? Because it is really, it's not you on the deepest level, but it's definitely you on some very deep level. But it's almost like it's like a physical manifestation of the real you that is going through some kind of process, over the course of many lifetimes. And this is the most recent iteration of a symbol of whatever that thing is that doesn't exist locally, physically, that is already in this other realm that we're talking about, right? This realm that's like this realm of nous, this realm of spirit, of soul. And the idea that somehow or another there's like this little symbol of it growing down here on earth, running around and it gets so enamored with this world that it completely forgets its connection to whatever this immortal thing is that it really is. It's just such an interesting idea that put a lot more color and nuance on it.
Dude, yeah, that's really deep. I'm sitting here trying to find a quote that I highlighted that's similar to that in The Secret Teaching of All Ages. I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but it's the concept that like symbols.
Hmm.
God, I wish I had it. I wish I had it ahead of time, but it's like symbols are. This blew my mind, and it's kind of a similar thought. Like there is a metaphysical existence that is, you could say metaphorical, that is
Hmm.
boundless, and then in our reality we have archetypal expressions of these different laws of nature which exist in these mathematically precise and proportionate symbols. Like the idea that we have, the yin yang, or, the Metatron's cube, or the Star of David, or the cross,
Yeah.
or whatever. All of these symbols that, like, we would initially think someone created them, right? Maybe not. Maybe it's like math. We didn't create math, we found math. Maybe
Yes.
we discovered these symbols, right? And they represent, I think, like, I think in the material world, things have to be crystallized. They have to be formed and like bound into place. And I think you're right. Like maybe our human body is like the bound form of what's the word? The sunthema, right? The soul.
Yeah.
Maybe these metaphysical symbols are like the bound form of these different laws of nature. And that is a very fascinating thing to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, it's either Jung or Joseph Campbell that has a quote that's getting right to what you're saying. It's that a symbol is something that lives in two realms, basically. It's
Yeah.
straddling. It's not reduced like the cross or the examples you gave. None of them are reducible to just being like a piece of wood that looks a certain way. They're like a portal that leads to this thing that you can this qualia or subjective experience that is very specific, and every symbol that is collectively that's shared by the collective unconscious basically leads you into deeper modes of reality that only that symbol can lead to. It's a deep idea, and the more and one of the other words for it is actually symbolon, where symbol comes from. So
Oh,
you will sometimes see sunthema and symbolon used in the same context by the same writers sometimes. So yeah, that's totally it. That's totally it.
wow.
Um, so we mentioned, that I have two personal friends that you are also friends with that had experiences directly with you. So I figure we should probably at least like summarize what happened with them. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, so the first person who I'm better friends with, Molly Adler, she hosts the Back from the Borderline podcast. We became friends through, I can't remember if it was a mutual friend or just podcast stuff. Maybe, I guess maybe a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago. Um, she so why don't you tell the story? I mean, you know the story better about how you and her connected than
Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to remind the listener that you guys have an episode about that, which I
Yes.
heard,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
I thought it was great. Um, yeah. So Molly reached out to me. I lose track of time, man. I'm sure you know how
Right.
that
I know.
goes. It's
Yeah,
just
for
so hard
sure.
to keep track of time anymore. But maybe it was about a year ago. Maybe something like that. Maybe I don't know. But she reached out to me, and it was like this pretty long message that was basically like, "Hey, I have a podcast about, what it's about, like I don't know exactly what it's about, to be honest. It's like psychology stuff, like helping
Hmm.
people with their psychological disorders and dispelling a lot of myths about that
Yeah.
and things like that. And she just sent me this long, really nice message that was like, I want to do a series with you about like toxic shame, and your family are like victims of toxic shame, and you guys have really been through a lot, and I just want to reach out, and if anything at all, just say hi, and I believe you, kind of thing. And I reached out and I was like, call me. Here's my number, call me. And yeah, we got on the phone, and our first phone call, we talked for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I just felt this amazing energy from her, that she was somebody that I could trust and that she was serious. And I've just had so many sketchy people come into my life, intelligence people, whatever, that you probably noticed by now that before we recorded at all, I was like, hey, let's talk first,
Yeah.
because I like to talk to people and feel their energy and feel, hear their voice and get a feel from them. Anyway, so we just got to talking and she was brilliant. I thought that she was like, uh, probably like the smartest esoteric chick that I had ever met, like just so deep down a
Yeah.
rabbit hole of all this stuff. And she's into the divine feminine. She had an experience about it, which is another part of the reason she reached out.
Mm-hmm.
And we hit it off. And she was like, I'd love to do a show with you and your dad. And I was like, that's a great idea. But how about you fly out here first and skywatch with us? And after you see stuff, then we'll do the show. And she's like, okay, sure. And I was like, how about 2 weeks from now? Pretty sure it was 2 weeks. It was pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, whatever, I've got nothing to lose. I've been looking for a reason to go out to North Carolina anyway, because my family lives in the mountains. So she jumped and she came right away and she went and visited her family in the mountains. And then her and her husband came to our house and we just had the greatest time meeting in person. And they really hit it off with my dad. Her husband and
Yeah.
my dad really clicked. They're really similar people.
Mm.
And we skywatched that night, and I can't even tell you how many things we saw because I honestly don't remember, but it was a lot. It was enough to be like a profound, life-changing experience for her and Zaz. And yeah, I mean, it was just like, I don't know. It's just you meet some people and you feel like you've known each other your whole lives. And she was kind of that individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just immediately were just felt very close. And I know that initially she was a little bit afraid to see things. I was telling you this last week on the phone that, like, an acorn would fall out of a tree and she would jump. Like she was very, kind of on edge. So I think that because of that, the phenomenon didn't necessarily get like closer to us. It was kind of out there in the sky, which for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people it gets close, like in the trees. Um, and I think if anything, it was very helpful for her because she has been through a lot. I don't know if she's talked about it on your show, but she
Mm-hmm.
talked about it on my show. She's been through a lot of really traumatic things. So I hope if anything it helped her with that. But yeah, and I think on the day that she left, which was the next day, she's just sobbing tears and she's like, all I want to do is help people. All I want to do is help spread the light and just thank you for letting me come out here and being so kind to us and just helping us to see. And they're like, no matter what, we're going to go forward. We're going to have your back. We're going to tell people what we saw and we're going to help spread the
Mm-hmm.
light and the truth. And we were like, thank you. And it was just this really sincere experience. And we've kept in touch ever since. We don't always have time to get on the phone, but we communicate a lot, like
Yeah.
text, voice message, that kind of thing. I did call her out of the blue because she sent me your episode, and then I listened to it, and then I called her, and we talked for quite a while about that. But otherwise, yeah, she's a wonderful human being, great friend, and she was really shook by the things that she
Mm-hmm.
experienced with us.
Yeah, she's really affable and just likable, and like you said, she
Smart,
is deep. She's really deep into searching for truth when it comes to psychological matters, when it comes to
yeah,
psycho-spiritual matters.
she's a
She's very
genius.
into, the esoteric in her own way for sure. But she's also the type of person who is not afraid to call things out that she thinks are bullshit, people who have an agenda, people who are not coming from the right place. And the way she spoke about her experience with you was nothing but it's legit. Like the culmination of her experience is something came very close to her, like an orb, or I'm trying to remember exactly how she described it, but something, it's like you guys were seeing things um far away, but there was a point where something came very close and it was brief, but it was unmistakable and it was very impactful for her. So that was that experience. And then our mutual buddy Chris Ramsey, admittedly, I don't know him nearly as well as Molly. We've done one podcast together. We chat back and forth. Uh, But again, one of the things that really drew me to Chris is he's this guy already has a preposterously massive following, like
Mm-hmm.
on his main YouTube channel. I'm sure does has zero financial need to worry about um gaining anything in that respect from going down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Yet he started this new channel that's all about the paranormal, UFOs, out of body experiences, which we haven't even talked about. We probably
Yeah.
need to have a whole separate
Well,
episode.
this opens that doorway a
It
little bit.
does. It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, yeah. But he what I love about his channel, obviously, is that first of all, the production quality is just off the charts. It's like watching a TV show
He's
every time he
visionary,
drops an
dude.
episode.
He's a
Yeah.
visionary.
But he's also the kind of guy who it feels like just going to tell you what happened. And
Yeah.
it's not like a huge embellishment or like he's just trying to make a good video or whatever. And one of the things that let's pause it there. So I do my podcast with him. You know, again, he just strikes me the same way I just described him, as really likable, really genuine.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Just like, you know, oh man, this is like the kind of friend who I'd want to go explore this stuff and then hear a real version of events from. And then you come up as a mutual connection yet again, you know, within a span of a couple months.
Yeah.
And he goes and hangs out with you, and I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. So just to add to his amazing character, he's a magician too. So
Right.
what do we know about magicians? They do tricks. They use deception, right? In a fun
Yep.
way, not in a malicious way, but they know the art of trickery. So I think that speaks to his character, that he's always in that world of like seeing through trickery and seeing
Yeah.
through deception. And he's just got this really good BS filter. And we talked about that too a little bit. But yeah, so we actually met at the Monroe Institute in June. We were invited separately. We didn't know each other, but we were invited to go to the Monroe Institute as creators. It's the first ever creator program that they had, where they invited like 10 different content creators in the kind of spiritual space to come and have the gateway experience free of charge, just like as a promotional thing. Like, come out, go through it, and then you guys are free to record, talk about it, make content, whatever you want to do. So we met there. And right off the bat, we all were, introducing ourselves to each other. And he kind of walked up, shook my hand. He said, "Hey, I'm Chris. I love your podcast. I love your dad's book. I'm a fan of the show. Like, what you do is awesome." I was like, "Oh, thank you, man. That's really cool." And admittedly, I didn't know who he was, because I'm not really a guy out there following YouTube channels. I never have
Right.
been that.
Yeah.
I've only ever followed like a couple podcasts. I live under a rock, right? So I didn't know who he was.
Well, in your defense, same with me. I think I had seen. I'm like, oh, I've seen this guy. Like, but I wasn't a follower, wasn't really familiar. And then what he was doing with Area 52 is so different and like right up my alley that I
Yeah.
immediately was like, oh shit, I'm watching this.
Yeah, for sure. Like I immediately I found out who he was with his channel and everything. I was like, dang, that's cool. Being a magician and all that. And we really hit it off. And I did feel at ease too, like making the connection with him, because I knew he had read the book and he knew the story. So that was like, okay, I'm a little disarmed. I feel like I don't have to explain myself, right? So the second day comes around, because we all get there kind of on the first day. You show up. You don't have like classes that day. It's just kind of like orientation. Everyone hangs out, socializes. So I got there, pretty late in the afternoon, go to bed. Breakfast the next morning, Chris walks up to me and he's like, "Hey, I hope you don't mind me asking this. I don't mean to like make you, on the spot or uncomfortable or anything, but I'd like to skywatch with you tonight if you're down." In my head, I was spiraling, because the day before I called my dad as I was driving to the Monroe Institute, and I said, "Dad, I'm on a secret mission and I want you to pray for me and keep your vibes out. But I actually do have a secret mission to show up here and help everybody else see the orbs, and like even the trainers. I wanted everybody there to see and experience it. And that was my secret thing. And my plan was to, around like the fourth or fifth day, break out that plan and try to help everybody see things." Chris walked right up to me and was like, "Let's go watch tonight." So I was like, "Oh crap." I wasn't mentally ready, but I'm
Yeah.
glad that he did, because it pushed me to be uncomfortable. and we just really hit it off. Our rooms were beside each other, so there's like multiple buildings on the institute with these different, like, kind of like dorm rooms,
Yeah.
and ours were right beside each other. So for every meditation, for every session, for every, all right, time to go to bed, we were like, you know, going to our rooms together, leaving the rooms together, going to class, whatever. It was like in and out for 6 days. We were just constantly kind of beside each other in that way. And we really had a lot of one-on-one time to talk. Yo, that meditation was crazy. Just things like that, And we kind of quickly, I think, bonded a little bit because of that too. But yeah, so we skywatched, I think one night it was too cloudy, I know for sure, but I think every other night, it was like 4 out of the 5 nights, we skywatched and we saw things every time. Every night, the crowd got a little bit bigger. By the final night, literally everybody was out there, including the instructors, including the program manager, Jason, and I think that's it. But it was like 15 people out there uh, skywatching on the last night. We all saw things. I did have a crazy out-of-body experience on the last day where I saw 6 hours in advance that was going to happen, and I announced it to the group, and it happened, and it was really crazy. So we went home back to our not really ordinary lives, and we had a plan that he was going to come out and do the podcast. And it was like 3 months went by from the end of June to, I guess he came, September, mid-September, he came and stayed. And we went out to the beach and we saw the craziest stuff, dude. It was like literally within 15 seconds of walking out to the beach, boom, there were orbs. We saw probably like 15 to 20 orbs in the first 5 minutes of being on the beach. Wow. I mean, it was just like bam, bam, bam. And we had another friend with us from the Monroe Institute, another mutual friend that we had there named Hannah Summerhill. She's a really amazing individual. And she does have a manifestation show too. She's like a manifestation expert. And I think it's the Hannah Summerhill show. But anyway, so she was there with us too. They both stayed at my house. I did a podcast with both of them. So we were all seeing this stuff together. And oh my God, like after seeing probably a few dozen orbs, when I say regular orbs, I mean just like they're really high up in the sky and they're like moving lights. They're obviously not regular, but they look regular compared to some intense things you see that like maybe they shoot across the sky in a streak, maybe they flash, maybe they go in a circle, maybe, there's a triangle of them. There's all kinds of like extra bizarre things that happen. And we saw something that was like level 10 extra bizarre, something that I've honestly never seen. I've seen things like this that were shocking like this, but I hadn't seen things that were shocking like this with other people. And especially you have to realize what's going through my head when I'm seeing things with other people that have large followings.
Right.
When I'm inviting people out to my space to skywatch with me, whether it's a crowd of 200 people or whether it's somebody with 7 million followers, I'm making myself vulnerable because what if they don't see something?
Right.
That is now, I saw something. I went and skywatched with the Bledsoes and didn't see anything. Right. And there have been thousands of times that we've invited people and been vulnerable like that and opened ourselves to study and rigorous research and all this whatever. And I'm very thankful that the beings have appeared every time. Without fail, they always appear. So this night with Chris, he was seeking something. I think he was seeking a pretty I think he had a deep need
high
to see
bar.
something. Yes, he had a deep need to see something like shocking. So what we saw, anyway, I'm gonna just get on with it. So what we saw was there were these massive orange lights. We estimate it could have been 8 of them, could have been 9, 10. I don't know. We were too shocked to count. But there were anywhere from 8 to 10 massive orange lights, kind of like orange balls of fire like my dad saw. And they were on the horizon over the ocean. And they were in a straight line. And it was the funniest thing, dude, because Chris had his little Osmo camera out and he was vlogging. And he was like, I'm here with Ryan Bledsoe. We just saw an orb, whatever. And we're talking about it in the camera. Dude, he has this. Have you seen an Osmo?
I think I know what you're talking about.
The one that spins on a gyro?
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know that. Okay,
it's like a little DJI pocket camera that the camera's on a gimbal. It's really cool. And he has the camera on his face and he's facing the ocean. And I'm standing facing him with my back to the ocean and we're talking face to face, right? and he has the camera on his face, and he's like, I just saw this, that, and the other, whatever. Someone behind him shouts, "Look, what is that? What is that?" I think it was Casey, my best friend's wife, the guy I do the show with, Nick.
Okay.
Bledsoe said so. His wife is like, look, there's something on the horizon, something like that. I don't know exactly what she said. And the funniest part is while Chris is vlogging, he has the footage. I hope he releases it, but I saw the video, right? As he's vlogging, he stops and the camera's on his face, and he just like, his jaw just drops. And he's like struggling to turn the thing around to record the horizon. By the time he turns it around, what had happened was the 8 or 9 lights, or however many of them, they did like a wave. They kind of like a snake, like they did a wave. And as the wave went on, they like blinked and flashed out one by one until there was one light left. And by the time he turned the camera around to record it, there was one light left. So in his video, you see that one single orange light, and then it blinks out. His face was like, he was like, "Dude, oh my God." He was shaking. He was like, "Look at me." He was shaking. He was like, "Oh my God. Oh my God." All of this, he's recording this. He was already vlogging, and it like happened naturally, right? And he's like, "Oh my God." He's freaking out. There's people down the beach, and they were like, "Did y'all see that? Did y'all see that?" It was these really nice, friendly, like kind of regular, I don't mean this in a negative way, but like kind of like redneck type North Carolina people. They were out there partying, this older couple, and they're like, "Did y'all see that?" They're like, "Those, did y'all see those flares?" They called the Coast Guard. They thought somebody was out there drowning and shot like 8 flares up into the sky. And we were like, "Those aren't flares." They walked over to us. The guy was really smashed, but he was super friendly. His wife was just like kind of really calm, and well, she wasn't drunk, rather. She wasn't calm. They were freaking out, but she was just like, "Oh my God, we think someone's out there drowning." And we're like, "No." And I'm kind of like teasing them a little bit, not in a mean way, but in like I have a secret, but you know, I'm just kind of being like, "You really think those were flares? Do you think that 8 people were out there drowning and shot flares up into the sky?" And I'm sitting there thinking like, how do I talk about this in a way that's not I don't know, not uncomfortable. And I'm like, what if it was a UFO? Chris is like, "I think they were UFOs." And they were like, "What? You think that's aliens?" They kind of get the vibe that we're out there looking for, UFOs. I had a little UFO head on my shirt, and they're like, "I don't know." Then the wife starts saying, "You know what? I never told anybody this before, not even my husband. But in 1968, I think it was her father or it was her grandfather. I think it was her grandfather. She's like, "My grandfather was sitting out here on that pier right there in 1968 and saw lights in the sky. He went missing for 2 hours, and he came back, and he was changed forever. I never told anybody till now." And Chris was freaking out. "Oh my God." He whips out his camera. He's like, "Can you tell me that again?" We're talking about all this stuff. At some point in this conversation, maybe it's right before she said that. Maybe she said all that because this just happened. I'm not sure of the order of things because it all unfolded so fast. We saw more of them. We saw more orange lights, but this time it was only 2 of them, and they were on the horizon. They showed up, and by now the couple is like, "Oh my God, it's UFOs!" And they're like no longer going with the whole flare thing. They call the Coast Guard. They get them on the phone. Dude, I start panicking because I'm like, I do not want the Coast Guard coming out here, interviewing us, looking me up and seeing me on some government military database somewhere and asking questions. I was freaking out a little bit in my head. All they did was they took down the information that they said. They hung up. They didn't come out, right? But they literally reported what we were seeing to the military. And we saw more orbs in the sky. We saw like a bunch of white lights shooting around. By now, the couple was completely into it. They were like, "This is amazing." And it just rocked their freaking world. They went from thinking it was flares to like not being able to deny that they were seeing something mystical and supernatural.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious, man. Like the novelty of this like innocent North Carolina ordinary country couple just coming up and being blown away and seeing all this stuff, not being able to deny it and having a positive attitude about it. By the end of it, he took down their email. I told him, "Here's my dad's book. Go check it out. I think you'll really like it." I think the wife was like, "I've heard of that. I've heard of Chris Bledsoe." I was like, yeah, that's my dad. Nice to meet you. And it was just this really kind of humorous, profound encounter.
Wow. So one, everybody can now see how my interest has been enhanced having two notable friends slash acquaintances going out and seeing this for themselves. And the fact that you say that it's like it's 100%, like it's not even, there's not been a single time where nothing has happened. That's insane. But I'm curious now, with this added level of perspective and you going deeper down the kind of esoteric rabbit hole, is there a way that you like when you see these orbs, is there a way that you think about them now? Or there as a language that you use to describe them change? Like what do you call these things? You just call them orbs or
Angels.
okay.
That's what we truly call them. That's what we really know that they are. And like I said earlier, in my dad's first ever report, I'll try to find it and send it to you.
Hmm.
I have it somewhere in my phone. He said, I believe that they're angelic. And yeah, I want to stress though, I mean, how can I say angels in the biblical sense, but also talk about hermetics? Well, you can take what works. You
Well,
don't
there
have
are
to.
angels. There are angels in Hermeticism too, so you're
Exactly.
good.
Yeah. A lot of people have criticized us because they think we're like religious nuts. I, I like Jesus. I think Jesus is freaking awesome. I like Hermes Trismegistus too. I like Buddha. I like Yoda. You know what I mean? I take what works. I take what's real. And I'm I'm not like a fundamental Christian anymore, but I do believe in angels. I think that a lot of people around the ancient world were talking about angels. The Irish called them
For sure.
fairies. Um, Buddhists might have called them like Buddhas or devas or something.
Hmm.
The Arab world might have called them jinn or genie. And I think that there is a overwhelming amount of evidence in the ancient
Yeah.
world that there were beings that were coming from the spirit world and were assisting humanity. And yeah, I think they're spirits. That's what they are.
Yeah.
And people think that we're like we call them UFOs because they are. And the truth of the phenomenon is that like the UFO phenomenon and the spiritual phenomenon are merged. Actually, you'll like my symbol. You can see it here, right?
Hmm. Yeah. It's a little dark. We'll be able to see it in the final
Yeah,
video. Yeah.
yeah. It's like it's a triangle with a UFO, and that's very intentional. The triangle. This came to me in a vision when we were starting the podcast. I was like, I need a sigil. You know what a sigil is, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I need a sigil. I need something that carries the resonance of what we're talking about, and something that I can send out into the world. And it came to me very clearly. The triangle is the pyramid, and then the UFO. It's merging the UFO phenomenon with the spiritual. That's what
Mm.
this means to me. And the reality is they are linked. Personally, I have not seen evidence. As bizarre as this might sound, I have not seen evidence that there are like green saucer men out there invading us from other worlds. I have seen evidence of spiritual phenomenon. I have talked to people in the intelligence agencies that have told me personally, like, for example, the guy who ran the spy program, 95% of the crap that you see out there about UFOs is fake. It is disinformation. A lot of it is lies. And honestly, what the lady told my dad, to elaborate more on what she said, why I have these opinions, she said, not only are they, using the book of Revelations for a script, the people who worship the dark force and power, not only are they using the book of Revelations for a script, but there's going to be a great deception. And that great deception would be aliens, that they are going to try to remove God from the equation and spin an alien threat, like this monster force that they're doing it to snuff God out. They're trying to kill God. That's why they're telling this very physical, material, alien story. If you notice, they finally recently acknowledged some sort of spiritual orb thing, but they're bad. They're scary. The blue ones are mean and they'll hurt you. Thanks, Lou Elizondo, for that lie. But yeah, I do not buy the alien narrative one bit. I think it is
Hmm.
complete bullshit. I have had people in the government tell us tell my dad rather, because a lot of times I was too young to participate in some of these things, but it's things he's told me over the years, right? They tried to convince us to change our story to be about reptilian monsters that eat people and conquer the universe. There is no God. There is no God. It's reptilians. When you die, you go into this light, you go into this little, the white light you see is like they're zapping you with a wand to make you go back to the earth prison. They have this Scientology-esque UFO religious mythological garbage that they're trying to inject into consciousness to completely snuff out our connection to the spirit. That is the insidious nature of the UFO agenda. I am 100% against it. If that offends anybody, sorry, but I've actually like lived in this world for the last 18 years. And I mean, you just got to understand where I'm coming from, dog. And
So you don't buy the idea that it could be both, like that there could be physical craft from somewhere else somewhere, or physical beings from somewhere else somewhere.
I'm waiting for
You
evidence.
okay. So
I'm
when you hear like the Grushes of the world and the other people who claim that they have like solid information, what do you think?
I've met people ranked way higher than Grush who look at us dead in the face and say the majority of this bullshit is fake and that we're never going to come out and tell the truth because we've been lying too much. People would outrage and revolt, and we would lose continuity of power because they would realize how many people have been killed over this subject. And then you see a low-level spook like Grush go up there, hold a piece of paper, and say, all right, everybody, my report from somebody that passed this piece of paper to me. By the way, I haven't seen anything with my own eyes, but my report says UFOs have harmed people. They're doing this, they're doing that, but I've never seen anything. You know what that's called? It's called plausible deniability. It's called lying. It's called spinning a narrative. I do not believe it one bit. I just don't. I've actually met people that are way higher than Grush that literally said, we will never tell the truth. You should go tell your story. That's one way to get it out there, but we're not going to do it. Can't do it. Matter of fact, we're going to spin it.
Do you ever worry that they're trying to manipulate your family into trying to spin certain narratives so that other narratives are not
Yeah,
promulgated?
There have been factions of the government, particularly people from the DIA. Most people are not aware of the DIA. That's the Defense Intelligence Agency. The CIA is supposed to be like international.
Right.
The DIA is national. And they are the ones who have levied death threats on us, who have just done all kinds of horrible things like cyber stalked us online and sent us messages threatening us with. One time I was threatened with legal action because we posted a picture of Diana Pasolka that she didn't even agree that we could post, which like there's no law broken there. But then someone in the DIA threatened us with like legal action if we didn't take it down. All kinds of things like that have happened. And yeah, they tried to get us to change our story to be about reptilians eating people. And they tried to convince us that there is no God. And at one point they said, if you go tell your story in a way that we don't agree with, no, this is what they said. They said, if the New York Times was to show up on your door tomorrow, would you tell your story? Dad was like, yeah, of course I would. And they said, well, if we don't like the way you tell it, we might just put a bullet in your wife and your son's brain. Maybe we'll run you off the road with a Mack truck and kill you in a way so that nobody even knows what happened to you. That's the kind of way that some of these elements have tried to manipulate our story to scare us from sharing the positive, fighting with us and arguing with us and threatening us to try to get us to spin the alien narrative, the monster narrative, the reptilians, which they told us slit little 8-year-old girls' throats and suck the life force out of them. And this is the bull crap that they tried to get us to spin. And we're like, no, it's garbage. It's dark. Tom DeLonge tried to make a movie about us and get us to change our story to be that. And we said, no, too dark. We're out. We're not going to sell our soul to tell that fucked up story. We're going to keep telling the truth like it is in the way that it's presented itself to us, that it's positive, it's benevolent, and it heals people. And it comes when you pray, particularly when you talk about the Trinity or even Jesus. Most people don't know that. It really likes that word. The phenomenon really does like that word. It appears a lot. Or when you say the mother or God, the Holy Spirit, even we start talking about these things and they get excited and they flash and they brighten up and they zip around the sky and they do all kinds of crazy shit. People are like, how do you make the connection? Is it like CE5 with Greer? No, we just go outside and we pray. That's why it's called UFO of God, because it's a spiritual thing. You don't need a silly little ritual or gimmick. You don't need to spin around 3 times and hop on one leg and then say kumbaya. And it's not a magic trick. It's a connection. It's just a request through prayer. Go outside at night, humble yourself, look up to the sky, know that they're there. They're always there, and say, "Hey, would you please would you be willing to appear? Would you be willing to show me a sign? I really need a sign. I need to see. If it be your will, can I see?" And I have had thousands of messages, even videos come through. Wow, it really works.
Hmm.
That's it.
Crazy, man. You kind of just hit a mic drop moment, I feel like, right on the 2 hour mark. So, I mean, dude, obviously there are whole other lines of exploration we haven't even touched. I should mention that now because of Chris Ramsey greasing those wheels, I'm now going to Monroe Institute.
I can't wait to hear
So
about that.
that's going to be a whole other conversation that we definitely should have when I get back. But dude, um, I'm sure, I kind of jokingly said before we hit record, I'm like, I think we might blow some minds today, Chris Bledsoe. And I feel like we have to have. I'm sure there's a sect of the audience that's just like, what the fuck? I don't believe this. But hey, approach it however you will. I'm certainly super intrigued. If there's ever an opportunity to skywatch with you, I'm definitely taking it.
Oh, you know
And
what? We're gonna work that out. So you go to Monroe in November, right?
yes,
And then obviously Christmas is right around the corner. That's busy for
yes,
everybody. I'm thinking Q1 2025. Come on,
let's do it, man.
let's make it
Let's do
happen.
it.
Yeah.
Woo! I'm excited. I'm glad to be friends with you. And
Likewise, dude.
I'm looking forward to dropping this one, my friend.
Thank you, man. And I really appreciate you just letting me get it out, because you have to understand this is therapeutic for me to sometimes just be allowed to talk, because um I it's like the how people lashed out at us and were so one way or the other, and sometimes it's really genuinely cathartic for me to just get it out, dude. So thank you for facilitating that space. Um and your show is awesome, dude. And I anytime, like literally anytime, like we're homies now. So
Thanks, man. Thanks. And you're most welcome. And we'll do it again for sure.
yeah.